to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend. What a weekend it was. As interesting as it was, the games, all of the news, all of the breathless reporting. And look, one of the main reasons I don't think anybody ever would want to go through an FBI investigation, and why I wasn't surprised that the Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee couldn't get Kavanaugh to call for an investigation, especially in the back of his mind, he had to know, there's a ton of stuff that I really don't want the FBI looking into. This is a rabbit hole that he's been able to avoid for a very long time. So, looking at what we see, are we surprised? Are we surprised at all? And the answer is no. Look, I think about myself. Would I want, my past dug into deeply and all of the things that, mistakes I've made, magnified? No, of course not. But then again, I'm not going to be seated on the highest court in the land. And one of the things that's angering and frustrating to me is that, this guy has gotten this far. 6 FBI investigations and a police report of him getting into a bar fight was never brought up. And, it's one of those things where, hey, youthful indiscretion. Look, I'm sure there are a number of police reports of idiotic bar fights when I was a kid, doing dumb things. But then again, I'm not accused of sexual assault either. I do have to say right from the start, the fact that Kavanaugh perjured himself is now glaringly apparent. And if you saw the interview with Chris Coons and Jeff Flake on 60 Minutes, they both said if he lied during his testimony, he's done. And it's clear that he did, because he was asked specifically about, when he heard of the allegations made by Ms. Ramirez against him. And he said, like everybody else in the newspaper, we're now finding out not so much. We're now finding out that his team of whatever spinmeisters, and I would have to assume including him, because they would have to know where to go, evidently were trying to text friends to come out against her before the story even dropped. In fact, trying to get a photograph where the both of them had been at a wedding together, like a decade later. And I guess, I don't know if he got it or he didn't get it, but, trying to get this photograph of her smiling with him in the picture. Well, now granted, there are 5 or 6 other people in the picture, but the fact that they were, in the same frame smiling, that proves I didn't wave my little member in front of her. I mean, this whole thing is just, and I said from the beginning, had he come out and said, look, I did a lot of dumb things when I was young and I apologize. That wasn't how I meant it, make up something, take some bit of responsibility, take some bit of courage and say, you know what, I apologize. It was, it's not who I am. Maybe they would have moved by it. I don't know. But what we saw, whatever the hell that was, which was perfectly, I'm not even going to say it was a caricature of the hearing on Saturday Night Live. It was actually an accurate depiction of what happened. And I thought, Matt Damon did a great job. He could be a Kavanaugh double. Had the sniffing and snorting and, had it all down. And to a T. But again, you look at this stuff and it's infuriating on so many levels that even as we speak, the Republicans their mind is, it doesn't matter what the FBI finds. And trust me, they're going to find a lot. It's only been a couple of days. We already got a bar fight. We already got text messages. We already got stuff that has already been leaked out. What are they really chasing down? What's Mark Judge telling them? Again, still not sure why he wasn't called to testify last Thursday. Not sure why he wasn't subpoenaed. But who knows what he's saying? Who knows what, where that leads? Because evidently there's a fourth person that she didn't remember that Judge could be the one that leads her in that direction, that leads them in that direction. Like I said, this is a rabbit hole. Kavanaugh and the Republicans did not want to see the FBI go down. Now understand, as I said, Mitch McConnell, Tippy Turtle himself, has come out and said that by the end of the week, it's going to happen. Vote's going to happen regardless. And you go, but you don't even know what the investigation, don't care. It's travesty. It's all about the Democrats. And, that frame, I don't know that it's really playing. Because, if you watch the testimony, and understand, 20 million of us did watch that testimony. And 20 million of us saw a woman come out and tell what was a very believable, very credible story. And share with us, something extraordinarily painful. And we also saw, the sniffing and snorting and stammering and belligerence and aggressive indignity that we saw from Kavanaugh. Again, asking questions of, this the guy you want on the court? But I thought McConnell's was interesting in that he's comparing this. The Democrats saying, hey, we need to slow down. We need to slow this down a little bit and get to the bottom, because do we really want an abuser on the court? Do we want another person with an asterisk next to their name on the court? And the answer is no, I don't think we do. But McConnell has taken this to, this is just like McCarthy. This is just like the McCarthy era. And I guess, maybe they're trying to cleanse the sins of the Republican Party past. I don't know. But, back in the 1950s, character assassination and uncorroborated allegations, of which, understand, Mitch McConnell would have been seated with his arm around Joe McCarthy. Trust me, that would have happened. But now, since it fits their frame, now we're going to attack the Democrats over this. And all they wanted was for an investigation. FBI, do your job. So we're going to get to a bunch of that later in the program. Propane Jane is going to be here to share some of her thoughts on what we saw out of Kavanaugh. Is he a dry drunk? Is this somebody who is abusive? Because understand, when you're a powerful rich white guy or a powerful, well-connected white guy who has access to friends to pay off all your gambling debts, that comes with a bit of power. When you're as well-connected as Kavanaugh was or is, I would, still is, especially during the Reagan years, allegations don't come easy, and they don't go unpunished. So we'll talk about that. Also, the new NAFTA. Is it lipstick on the pig? Is this the Republicans' new baby? Is it going to make lives any better? We'll find out about that. So much to get to. Also, did you know today? You wouldn't know it from the news reports. Manafort is actually talking to Mueller. There is a pretty sizable chance that the bird is singing and singing a tune that not Trump going to like. So we're going to find out about that. Didn't really make the news, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Also, one of the things that's really infuriating to me, and, this comes back to the Kavanaugh thing. I had this conversation of, just the other day with one of my Teamster buddies who voted for Trump, big Trump guy, big Kavanaugh guy, who said that, liberals are just trying to usurp the Constitution. And, it got me to thinking about that, because the Senate does have the job to advise and consent, and they should be, seeking down every credible lead and every avenue, because look, this is a lifetime appointment. There's no going back on this. There's no, oops, made a mistake. But there's also the idea, and this is where I shot back. I said, here's my problem. Republicans are trying to destroy the Constitution. They're trying to amend the Constitution without actually going through the amendment process. These are people who want to fundamentally change the Constitution as it is right now. These are people who tell us openly they believe in the original intent and want to go backward, which means, sorry, African Americans, you are now 3/5 a person again. Sorry, women, no vote for you. Sorry, non-land owning white males, no voting for you. And all of that, gays, lesbians, all back in the closet, all that stuff. That's where they want to go back to. And, they're doing it without, hearing from the will of the people. And I said, the amazing thing here about this country to me is the idea that, for the first time really in the history of civilization, we've had a long period, 250 years of self-governance, of a constitution that has withstood civil war and uprisings and, depressions and, all kinds of stuff. And Republicans right now have found a way, again, I mean, this has happened before, of using the court to rewrite the Constitution without going through the Constitutional Convention or the amendment process. Because understand, if you want to amend the Constitution, there's two ways you do it. One is you propose an amendment. You go through, I think it's 2 cycles, and you get, 3/4 of the states, which I guess is like 38 states right now, to have their legislatures, sign off on it. And if 3/4 of the states agree, bang, constitutional amendment. Now, good luck getting 3/4 of the state, which is why they put the bar so high. Also, if you wanted to have a constitutional convention, the other way, you need to have 2/3, which is about 34 states right now. They don't want to do that. And to me, the idea of having the filibuster is that you had to get 60 senators to sign off on a nominee, which I believe is a moderating effect. Same thing with changing the Constitution. We don't want to have wide constitutional swings. We don't want to have wide ideological swings in our laws. We don't want one administration to take us extreme to the left, nor do we want to go extreme to the right. And we certainly don't want to be pendulum them back and forth. We'd like the pendulum to be somewhere in the middle, just kind of banging around a little bit. Not way over here and way over there, which is why, again, those bars are so high. And they should be. And I look at this as another one of these moments where the Republicans and Democrats too. Look, the Democrats did it on the federal judiciary because they couldn't get their appointments pushed through. So, I mean, there's a lot of blame for everybody. But when the Republicans broke the filibuster for Gorsuch, we ended up heading down this road of getting really, really extreme. And I would argue Gorsuch and now Kavanaugh are really, really extreme. Even almost as extreme as Thomas. So for me, this is a scary moment. And the question is, what do we do as a country? Can we, as polarized and divided as we are, can we come together and agree we don't want extremists on either side of the aisle? Because let me let you in a little secret. Democrats are going to take control in 2020 of the White House. They're going to have control of the House here in 2018. That's probably going to happen. There's a good chance 2020 Democrats get control of the Senate as well because of how the maps are laid out. Could be another wave year. You could see a couple of Supreme Court justices go, and you could get really far left, as far to the left as Kavanaugh and Gorsuch are far to the right. And I would argue that that's not great for democracy. So lots to get to, lots to talk about, lots of thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Brett Pransky. He's running for State House in Ohio, 77th State House District. I'm going to share some thoughts on Kavanaugh, on some of the messaging that's coming out of this, and, the whole Me Too, where we go, how elected officials, handle this stuff going forward. and some of the other things around this. Quick break, right back with our good friend Brett Pransky. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Illinois Governor Frank Loudon hoped to meet with striking streetcarmen in an effort to end their strike. Transit workers in Springfield, the state's capital, had been off the job since July 25th. But the strike had gained so much support that Springfield had now erupted into a full-blown general strike. According to the Sangamon County Historical Society, thousands of union members shut down mines, railroads, bakeries, restaurants, laundries, and construction sites following the violent crackdown of a pro-labor march by state police and militia. The march had been scheduled for September 9th. The union hoped to show support for the striking streetcarmen after a number of clashes between strikers and state militia. After they were denied a permit, many of the 50 or so unions decided to march anyway and were attacked. Some were shot. More than 40 suffered bayonet-inflicted injuries. By the 11th, most everyone in Springfield had walked off the job. Striking women shoe factory workers stopped a streetcar, pulling the scab drivers off by force. By the end of the week, as many as 12,000 members of 34 unions in the city were on strike. When telephone operators walked off the job, they paralyzed communications of the scab streetcar drivers and the state National Guardsmen. The streetcar strikers refused to meet with the governor until troops were withdrawn from the city. The governor insisted disloyal, pro-German forces were at fault for the labor troubles. By the 16th, the streetcarmen agreed to negotiate and the general strike was called off. But the company refused to meet striker demands for recognition and higher wages, or even take them back. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This little song is more to the point. Roll out the barrel and lend me your ears. I like beer. It makes me a jolly good fellow. I like beer. It helps me unwind and sometimes it makes me feel mellow.
If anything came out of the Kavanaugh hearing, it's got to be the resurgence of Tom T. Hall. It's got to be. I mean, is he still alive? I would love to see a reunion tour. If anything comes out of this, anything positive, the I Like Beer song again. Because as soon as I saw Kavanaugh, just kind of railing on, that was the first thing I thought of. I like beer too. It's been a while since I've had any, but I guess there's common ground. But anyway, we're here to share some thoughts on maybe what that was we saw and what it means for us as a country going forward. Again, I've asked our good friend Brett Pransky, Democratic rep. He's going to be running for State House, or he is running for State House there in Ohio 77th District. Brett, out the vote. And please, in that district, get out the vote. Brett, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So, I guess initial reaction. What was that on Thursday?
Wow. Well, it sure was something. Again, it's kind of interesting because I did my graduate work in rhetoric down in Ohio University, so I love a good argument. And we just didn't get one on Thursday. I was looking for one, and all I saw was just a really bad case after really bad case after really bad case. I mean, when you look at the initial testimony, Dr. Ford was very credible, and then out comes Brett Kavanaugh just yelling and crying, and it was really, really odd that after a full week of coaching at the White House that he would come out and put on a performance pretty much for a single person. I just found it really odd.
I did too, and I had that question, and in fact, I questioned this on Thursday. What the heck was his legal team thinking? Is that the advice that we paid to give him?
Yeah, I mean, the idea, because and the first thing that people seem to skip over as we look into these hearings is this is not a trial. So we're hearing a lot of calls for evidence of this and evidence of that and evidence of the other thing. And while, yeah, we would like to have some, it's not required. This is a job interview.
Right.
You know, and it's a job interview with a lot of really qualified folks. So if I've got a list of 20, 25, 30 candidates for a particular job, and I find out that one of them has pretty significant baggage, you know, I'm not necessarily looking for definitive proof, and no one is going to fault me for going to one of my other candidates. You know, so why we are looking for this kind of, oh, we must have this ironclad proof, and it must be some kind of big Democratic con job, or what I think that's what the president called it. It just didn't seem to make sense. I mean, this is essentially a job interview. When you consider that one of the main characteristics of this job is a certain type of demeanor. To see him come out, you know, just throwing fireballs like he did, he was like, hey, that's great on the campaign trail maybe, but that's not what I want sitting on the, you know, sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I thought. Did you see the Saturday Night Live bit? I thought Matt Damon hit it perfectly. I'm going to start off at 11, and I'm going to go to 15 right away.
Yeah, I saw that. It was really funny. It was really good. I especially like Kate McKinnon's Lindsey Graham, who I'm honestly, I'll never see the guy the same way again. I'm going to see Kate McKinnon every time I watch Lindsey Graham from now till the end of time.
As you should. But, you know, I look at this, and again, you know, you hit an extremely important point in that, you know, temperament is important. And, you know, I've said a number of times, you know, you got to know your room. And, you know, the room that he was playing was not just those senators sitting on the panel. It was the 20 million of us who sat all day long and watched this play out. We have to have some faith in the people who, in those 9 robes sitting on that bench. And quickly we're not, because, look, when he gets put on the court, and I've taken the position, there's no way it's going to stop. Because they're already you know, saying by the end of the week it's going to happen. You know, do we really want 3 justices with asterisks after their names?
Right. And, you know, what really upsets me about this whole process and how it's playing out is just how disingenuous things are on the right. We keep getting these complaints about how this is a political sideshow, and the Democrats have, you know, they planned this and they orchestrated it, and so on and so on and so on. And, you know, I always like to look at arguments because it's, you know, it's kind of my expertise. It's what I do. And so I ask myself, okay, let's just for the sake of argument, let's assume that all of that is true. Let's assume that this was a political hit, that it was all orchestrated, let's assume that all of that was true. And then let's ask ourselves, if that is the case, if the argument that they're making is actually what's going on, would they be behaving this way? And the answer is no. I mean, if this is what they say it is, if this was a setup, if this was a big political con job or hit job or whatever it is that Kavanaugh and Trump are calling it, if it was those things, you've got the Democrats right where you want them. Because you call the investigation, you bring in everybody, and you show the world what the Democrats did, and you stop the blue wave right here. I mean, if it really is a setup, that we've given you everything you need to beat us in 2018 and 2020, and we've handed it to you on a silver platter. So why is none of this stuff happening?
No, you're right. And look, you know, I asked the question, why, you know, if I'm Kavanaugh, I want the investigation. If you're really not, and I know I called for a hearing the next day, but you know, if you're really not in that position, you call for the investigation. And it was one of those weird moments during the his entire time on the hot seat that, you know, I'm going, you know, why is it he's taking this? You're going to, you know, do it whatever you want. No, you are the one that we're asking. Call for an investigation, and you refuse to do it. It was really bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it was really strange. You could tell not just by his behavior, but by the behavior of the people supporting him, by the behavior of the Republicans on the committee and Republicans in general. Everyone knows this is true. Everyone. And for example, look at what they've done since. They're trying to do this unbelievable rhetorical backflip. They're trying to say that Dr. Ford was credible, and, you know, and worth listening to, someone who we should really pay attention to. And they also support Kavanaugh. Now that's an untenable position, because
right.
If she is credible, then you have to pull him. There's no other option. There's no she's credible, but
yeah, but the caveat, but isn't the caveat what they throw out there is, yeah, well, she was credible, but, you know, something happened to her, but it wasn't necessarily him.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple of those conspiracy theories. I think the guy who trotted the first one out, the one about mistaken identity, I think wasn't he the guy responsible for all the Swift boat stuff back in the day?
Well, yeah,
So-
but hey, facts be damned.
Right. So I mean, it's one of those things where if we can oppose each other, all the live long day, but make an honest argument. And that's not what's happening. What we're getting from the right in defense of Kavanaugh is just there's no part of it that's true. I mean, because if it were true, they'd be beating us up with it right now. I mean, they would take us to school. They would turn back the blue wave. They would, it would all be about Democratic conspiracies and how we're, and how we made all of this stuff up. If that was the case, they'd call every investigator in. They'd be calling for senators' jobs. Let's find out who leaked this stuff, and that person needs to be fired. They would be doing all of these things because the right has never, or at least the Republican Party has never refused to throw a punch, pretty much ever. And if this is what they say it is, it's set up so perfectly for them to just knock us out, that the fact that they won't throw the punch tells us everything we need to know.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at what they did with Benghazi. I mean, how long were they investigating that? I mean, they beat that just senseless. And again, found nothing, but that didn't stop them from calling another investigation. So you're spot on. I mean, the reality is if this were actually true, this is what would stop any blue wave. And you're right. I mean, I struggle sometimes to, when I look at where we are as a country, that the party who tells us they're the party of family values, they're the party of law and order, that they do this kind of stuff. I mean, getting behind an alleged pedophile in Alabama, and this, what happened to the party of family values? What happened to the Christian God-fearing nation party? What happened to them?
Yeah, and I mean, and just today, the name of the legislator escapes me. I believe it was a senator. He pulled out the crazy card today. He said, "I think she might be disturbed," or something like that. That may not be a precise quote, but they're actually playing the "she must not be right in the head" card. I think she's mistaken.
Yeah.
And of course, Orrin Hatch did it at first, saying that she was all mixed up. Now, keep in mind, there all these questions about, it was 35 years ago, and why is she coming out now? We just had a whole bunch of men accuse another powerful institution, namely the Catholic Church, in Philadelphia a short time ago. Again, after about the same time period, 35 years later, all of them instantly believed.
Right.
Instantly credible. No questions about, hey, I think you might be mixed up. I think these guys might be mixed up. So what's different, in between these two? These folks over here are instantly believed. Dr. Ford, keep in mind, we're not just talking about, we're talking about an accomplished woman, with a PhD, with when you look for all those different reasons as you go down the line looking for ways to discredit her, you can't check any of those boxes with her.
Yeah, she's got everything to lose in this.
Yeah, she told her story first, I think, was it 6-7 years ago? Yeah. She took a polygraph. She asked for an FBI investigation, which, again, if she is lying, which is basically what the Republicans are saying, she's mistaken. Well, if that's the case, she lied in a congressional hearing, and that's a jailable offense. Why aren't they pursuing charges? Why aren't they going after? Because keep in mind, these guys are hyper aggressive. If they had it, they would use it.
No, there's no question. But I've asked this question, and I asked it, over the last couple of weeks, because I, as a white male, alpha male, if you will, I don't understand why you would wait 35 years to go after this or pursue this. I don't know why immediately there wasn't seeking retribution, seeking justice, whatever word you want to use. And then I watched this whole thing play out, and it's now becoming more apparent to me. I don't know that I would come out now.
Yeah, I found that as we look into these issues, and again, we kind of have to recognize our own position, and not only how we view the world and the lens through that we view the world through, but how that world views us. And it kind of gives us a pretty good because initially we're like, well, of course she should come forward, but we're also saying that from a position, say, for me, your typical white male, I know I wouldn't be treated as she has been treated. So of course my initial reaction is, well, of course she should come forward, you know, but I don't really, but it's because the same kind of threats that she faces, I won't face in the same circumstance. So I don't recognize them as real in the same way that she must.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and this is where, you know, I want to be helpful. I just don't know that I just don't, I think most men want to make sure this doesn't happen. I think most men want to be helpful. At least I think, I hope, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, there's especially on the left, we have this this desire to be an ally. We want to, you know, we want to be there. We want to help folks. You know, we want to help people who are being disenfranchised, who are being discriminated against, and we often see ourselves as being in the same foxhole with some of these folks. Your fight is my fight because I'm one of the good guys. But we don't often recognize and don't often realize. And this is often why, you know, a lot of these folks who are victimized don't trust us. You know, it's because, you know, the privilege that we have can't be given back. You know, we can't give it over. All right. And whether we want to or not, we benefit from it multiple times in every day. Everything from the way I'm treated, you know, by people when I walk into a store, to all the times I don't get pulled over, to, you know, there's just, you know, just an uncountable number of ways in which privilege benefits us. So when we see ourselves as kind of being in the same foxhole with some of these folks who are dealing with this in a much more real and inescapable way, we don't often recognize that, because if I'm in that foxhole, say with someone like Dr. Ford, and I really want to do my part and I really want to do my best, I always, at every moment, have the option to hop out of that foxhole. You know, I can jump out any time and reclaim my privilege and reclaim my power and go back to the world that will treat me differently and treat me better. And, you know, a lot of these other folks don't have that. And so sometimes that disconnect, we often wonder why we're not fully trusted. And that's typically why.
Yeah, I tend to stay out of this stuff because it's not my lane. You know, I want to be supportive, but I generally don't. When the whole Me Too movement started, I didn't get involved in it at all. I'm going, look, I'll be supportive, but I'm not jumping in the middle of this. You go.
Right, and that's, you know, it's all part of the, you know, part of the same thing. I can't, you know, I couldn't give back my privileges even if I wanted to. So I have to understand that there's a large segment of the population out there who is going to experience these things in a way that I just cannot and will not ever understand. There are folks out there who are gonna forget more about these issues that I will ever know,
right,
no matter how plugged in I consider myself to be. So, you know, it's just a matter of trying to do the best I can and listen as much as I can, and you know, and do my best to fight injustice wherever I can. And, you know, even though at the same time I understand that, you know, that there may never be a time when I can be fully trusted to be the ally I really want to be.
Yeah. Now, you know, again, let's bring this back to your race. You're running for State House there in Ohio, of which, you know, I hope people will check out your website, brettpransky.com. Also follow you on Twitter at Brett Pransky. You know, how does this now, you know, how will this help you, you know, in the race? And obviously, you know, once you become a state representative, you know, what do you take with you into that role?
Well, it's actually, you know, these kinds of issues are being talked about every day, at every door, every time I knock, and so on. It's actually made things a little bit difficult, because here at the state rep level, there's a lot of kind of day-to-day constituent services kind of stuff that, you know, that people really do vote about around here, but we can't get over the national noise to discuss, you know, local issues. So we're not talking about local schools as much as we should. We're not talking about local roads as much as we should. Some of these things that are of real importance to folks in their everyday lives, we're not talking about them enough, because there is just so much volume and intensity coming out of the national debate these days.
Yeah.
We can't seem to get around it to handle some of the, you know, some of the local issues that are of some real serious importance.
Yeah, it's sucking all the oxygen out of the room to where we're not talking about, you know, the stuff that you thought you probably would. And look, a lot of this stuff is not something a state representative, you know, at the state level can even deal with. But I'm sure it's what people want to talk about. So how do you cut through that to make sure that, people will go, look, I'm on the right side of this, but I also want to make sure that your kids get a great education, that we get health care, that we get roads and bridges, that we get investment, that we do the right thing by our local neighborhood. How do you cut through that?
Well, usually the discussion that I have is, because this is typically what folks want to talk about a whole lot. And the pivot here, if there is one, is to kind of join the race that I'm in to this other stuff. So that's why elections matter up and down across the board. They matter in off years. They matter in midterm, elections. They matter every 4 years in the presidential election, so on. And, try to connect that to some of the local issues as much as I can, because these things, when they happen at the national level, they also happen here locally as well. These issues, we've had a big problem here, with our education system, especially with corruption and things like that. There's been a lot of tax money stolen from the people and so on. So there's usually a way to kind of, pivot off of the national stuff, the things that won't be part of my day-to-day activities, and bring things back to, to local issues and things like that really need a lot of work, like job creation and, and better roads and better schools and things like these are things that we desperately need. And we've just been, we've basically been stealing from the people for the last 7 years in order to send tax cuts up to the top 1%. We need to cut it out. And so there's usually, an opportunity to take those more national issues and kind of, pivot off of them into some of the stuff that people can really make a difference about here locally by getting involved.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of it, I'm hoping people are getting out. I'm hoping people are planning on marching November 6th right to the polls to make sure that we elect good, decent, honest people and turn this around. And I'm hoping yours is one of them. I mean, I've been talking to you for a while. I think you're on the right side of history. I think you're on the right side of the issues. The hope is that in a somewhat Republican district, that we have this kind of willingness, especially at this moment, to kind of look in a different direction and say, you know what, we're not really on the right path as a country.
Yeah, I think that, what I'm seeing, and again, in a district like this, you got to knock a lot of Republican doors. And nobody is sending me away. Nobody is refusing to have the conversation. The only people who are sending me away are Democrats, to be completely honest. The Democrats will ask me, are you the Democrat in the race? I'll say, yes, I am. They're like, move along. Don't spend your time here. You got my vote. So I'm getting sent away by more Democrats than anybody else. But people are receptive. People they're listening, and across the board, regardless of their party affiliation, they want change.
Yeah. Just
about everyone wants change. I mean, this has been a unbelievably nerve-wracking couple of years, and people want it to stop.
Exactly.
They want to get off the crazy train. So all you need to do in this election, and all I've needed to do so far, is let them know that there's a Democrat in the race, and that Democrat is sane. It really hasn't been a high bar so far. If I let people know that I'm an honest, decent guy who's going to put their needs ahead of big business and ahead of the party and ahead of these things, and just vote for the people, then they're receptive and they listen, and there will be a lot of votes that were cast for Republicans in 2016 that are going to be cast for me, here in about 30 days.
Good stuff, Brett. I appreciate the time. Good on you. Good luck.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, our good friend Brett Pransky. Make sure you check out his website, brettpransky.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Puts my mouth in gear. While this little refrain should help me explain, as a matter of fact, I like beer. Last night I dreamed that I passed from the scene, and I went to a place.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1851. That was the day that William Henry, a black cooper or barrel maker who went by the name of Jerry, was arrested in Syracuse, New York. He was first told that he was being arrested for theft, but then he learned that federal marshals had arrested him for violating the Fugitive Slave Act passed the year before. Jerry had escaped slavery in Missouri, The Anti-Slavery Liberty Party was holding its convention in a nearby church. When word came about Jerry's arrest, a crowd rushed to release him. Once released, he was quickly recaptured and returned to custody. But then a large crowd, numbering more than 2,000, gathered to free Jerry from the office where he was being held. According to research done by the Syracuse University Library, the first person into the office was J.M. Clapp, an ironworker likely chosen for his brawn. The crowd was able to free Jerry and hide him until he could escape into Canada. Clapp also had to flee to Canada to avoid arrest along with 8 others. 19 people were indicted for participating in the rescue. Only one person was ever convicted, and he died before he could appeal. In turn, the abolitionists won an indictment against the marshal who had arrested Jerry. They charged him with kidnapping. Although the marshal was acquitted, it gave the abolitionists a chance to publicly challenge the constitutionality of the Fugitive Slave Act. Each year until 1858, a Jerry Rescue celebration commemorated the event. Abolitionists referred to the, quote, Jerry level as a standard for justice. In 2001, a monument to the rescue was dedicated in Clinton Square in downtown Syracuse. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
The most important issues of the day. This is the most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, the new NAFTA. Evidently, they wanted USMC to pair the United States Marine Corps, but I guess, someone talked him out of it. It's now USMCA. So, there you go. Canada signs on last minute. From what I'm reading, I don't know. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the news of the day. Also, the new NAFTA. Our good friend Bob Nate, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Sounds like YMCA. I've got to tell you, this one I think is in the win column in the sense that, and I am personally, I'm an unapologetic Bernie Sanders trait guy. Through and through.
Right.
I've done press conferences with Bernie Sanders. So, but I like this. Now, a couple of things. Right now, we know it benefits dairy farmers. Is there a lot more we know about it right now? No. Will time tell? Actually, Rick, yes. It'll take about a year. Let's see where the stats are. Let's see how the trade's going, et cetera. But I must say, I put it in the win column because for years, political figures of both parties have beat their fists down. They're going to do something. They're going to do something out of China. And year after year, we eroded for a wide variety of reasons.
Right.
So, this one, Mexico came on board, boom, because the new president of Mexico wanted to get it off his plate, to be honest with you. The new president of Mexico, who's way to the left, literally wanted this taken care of, but he didn't care. If it was fine, as long as he didn't have to deal with it.
Right.
And it took a problem away from him. Then Canada, it looked like, we were in a bad relationship. Nothing was going to happen. And they've been negotiating with the trade rep. And boom, 2 hours before they sign it. So I've got to put it for right now in the win category, continuing to do this. And I would hope future White Houses and presidents and Congresses get on board to continue to make, a lot of changes and make up for lost ground. So I think this is a lot better than nothing. What's going to happen? Kind of unsure. But at least, something.
Is it a lot better or is it marginally better? I mean, I've been seeing a lot of
marginally. I don't think it's a lot.
Okay, because I've been reading a lot of responses out there, and like as the one I saw said, this seemed like an awful lot of turmoil and an awful lot of beating up on our friends and neighbors for a couple of gallons of milk. And,
well, I don't think it's. I think it's marginal, but I guess here's the point. I mean, we have to start somewhere.
Right. No, I'm with you. I'm with you on this that on something moving is better.
Start.
But here's the other question. Now, as you were someone who was there when the original NAFTA was going through, and Bill Clinton got saddled with the whole thing, even though NAFTA was birthed under Reagan, fully negotiated under George H.W. Bush, and would have been signed by H.W. In fact, the first layers of it were signed by H.W. Bush. Had Bush won the second term, he would have signed that without some labor and environmental things that Clinton demanded. But for that, Democrats have been saddled with this. This is Clinton's NAFTA. Sure. Is this the moment where this becomes the Republicans' new NAFTA?
Well, no, I don't think so. I think this is Trump's new NAFTA, and I'll tell you why. Republicans, not all of them. Let's go back to my days there for a second. There were 50 of us, and I can, Lo Biondo, Steve LaTourette, I can go down the list, right? Rodney Frelinghuysen from New Jersey, I can go down, the list of them on the Republican side.
Right.
And Democratic side, too, Paul Ganjorski of Pennsylvania, et cetera. But anyway, there were 50 that were not free traders. But a lot of them are gone, and the vast majority of the Republicans do not like this. They don't want this. They're not happy about it. So I can't call it the Republican new NAFTA. And in fact, I think if some of the Republicans had their way, like Paul Ryan, et cetera, I think they would like to even reverse this small change. So I think this is kind of the Trump NAFTA, despite the Republicans.
But, the thing is, a lot of Democrats were against NAFTA as well.
So, sure.
By having Clinton sign his name to it, you're the titular head of the party. You're it. So, regardless, because as you pointed out, there were a number of Democrats who voted against it, as well as a number of Republicans. But at the end of the day, it was still, this is Clinton's baby. So it's my view that this is Trump's baby, ultimately being the father of the Republican Party right now. It's their baby as well.
Yeah, whether they like it or not. But of course, most of not all, but most of the Democratic side did not like free trade bills, which always made me very happy because I didn't like free trade bills, But you're right. There was still people said it. Who gave you NAFTA? Quote, the Democrat Party, the Democratic side, you always heard that. Sure.
Yeah, but most people don't even know the history of it. And it was, like I said, it was birthed under Reagan.
Well, I think a lot of presidents get in there and then they kind of become the worldview president. They have to stand up for the world. I swear, something happens to them. They get in there and they become the president of the world. And I don't mind them, obviously they have to do certain things, but I never liked it when they became president of the world for free trade.
Yeah.
That part I didn't like.
Well, that's one of the things you can say about Trump. He's definitely not trying to be the president of the world.
No. Oh, no.
I don't know that he's really trying to be the president of the
universe,
U.S.
Maybe, but yeah.
But there is that. Anyway, let's move along. You can't have a day go by without talking about Kavanaugh. Did you check out Did you see the Saturday Night Live bit?
No, I must check it out tonight. I have been so busy this weekend. I was busy, and today on radio, I've got to check it out. I've heard all about it.
It was quite a performance by Matt Damon. The sniffling and the and the squee and the donkey dung dug, and it was funny. You have to check it out. But so where are we with all of this going on? Did you see the 60-minute bit with Coons and Flake?
No, I heard about it, but I didn't see it. No. But I think Flake, there's several things. I think Flake, when he did this, I know he upset a lot of people. What's another week or two, frankly, or three? It doesn't matter. But Mitch McConnell said, well, give it exactly 7 days, which is Friday, and they're going to have a vote. We'll see what happens there. I'm very uncomfortable with, I believe in, obviously I'm in the media, so are you. But it makes me very uncomfortable. The media is immediately tracking down anybody they're talking to and trying to get them to talk. It's just like, just let the FBI make a report, chips fall where they may, see what happens, and see what comes out there. I really don't believe that the White House, that they have said, here's the only two people you can talk to, because, first of all, it's kind of, once the president releases this to happen, as they did under Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, Bush 41, well, then it's under sort of the purview of the Senate. Now, if anybody goes and tries to restrict the FBI, I would assume the FBI can be asked, did you follow the orders of anyone to restrict?
Right.
Do you only talk to the following people? I'm assuming 300 to 400 different phone calls are going to come into the FBI today that, they've done something with, Kavanaugh or with Dr. Ford. And, the FBI is going to have to sort through all of that to find out, what's credible or not and take a look at it. The misnomer here by the public, and not all of them, but some of the public believes that the FBI can say this one's guilty or that one's guilty. The FBI is not supposed to do that. They're supposed to gather facts, although
Right.
Comey decided to clear Hillary Clinton himself and then trash her. Comey operated that way, which I never thought was correct anyway. But they're supposed to just come to, the factual side of it. So, we're going to see what happens.
No, and I hope we do get to the bottom of it, because I don't know that this is good for the country. I don't know this is good for the next set of hearings. I don't know that this is good for the sanctity of the court, if there is anything, if there is any sanctity left. And what's interesting is, I'm sure we've all seen the reports that the administration through Don McGahn they were trying to narrow the scope and just keep it to right here in these parameters. And now I guess that's changed. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of days.
Right, and see what they deliver. And the Anita Hill investigation was a 3-day investigation. I don't know the length of this. I don't know anybody can tell the length of this. They did decide, 7 days.
Yeah, well, we'll see. At the end of it, it's a very interesting time, to say the very least. Let's move along. Evidently, is this accurate? One of the Democrats, if the House changes hands, that already you've got Gerald Nadler saying we're going to be investigating.
Well, there's two ends of things where you kind of want to say to people, calm down and take a breath. One end is Mitch McConnell, first of all, calling for a vote Friday.
Right.
Going back to Grassley, where he called and put it on the docket for a vote before they even had the testimony of Dr. Ford, and you're sitting there going, really? And now Jerry Nadler, who I serve with, congressman from New York, is saying, the House is going to investigate Kavanaugh. And it's like, okay, you might have the ability to, but can you kind of just wait?
Yeah, can you wait till you find out what the FBI says?
Right, exactly. So I'm looking at this going, okay, everybody, I understand getting into media, fine, but yeah. So I think it's a feeding frenzy of media.
Yeah.
And the House hasn't been, remember now something, the House hasn't been in this. So it's all been the Senate.
Right.
So he did get headlines.
Oh no! Look, when I saw this, I'm going, way to shoot yourself in the foot, because this is going to be used by the other side. I don't know. You played football when you were a kid, right?
A little bit, yes, sir.
Yeah, when you were in high school, the coach always, or even when I was in college, the coach would always, put up something on the board as you were leaving the locker room of something the other coach said or something another player supposedly said that was supposed to eat at you and get you angry all week.
Right.
This is one of those things.
Yeah. I didn't play on the football team. I played pickup football, but I wrestled, and the coach would do that to us in wrestling. That they were saying things about our school and that we were trashy and all that kind of stuff. Sure.
And you think back to that and you go, what kind of mindless manipulation was that?
Yeah, it worked. So, but I saw that. Yeah. Okay, everybody calm down, take a breath.
Although, the question then becomes, let's say that, there's the black cloud over his head and, McConnell and Grassley do ram him through. Is there anything the House can do?
No. It's advice and consent of the Senate. This also, I'd have to refresh my memory with the tapes, but this also, there's something in here that gets me. If you look at Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, which it came back quoting conclusive. Okay, right. We know that. Clarence Thomas was mad. He was upset. Actually, I know one of his family members who, to the day I last saw them 12 or 14 years ago, they were furious still. But I must say, I don't recall Clarence Thomas attacking individual members of the Senate after that. I don't recall that, in the sense of Kavanaugh, when he's asked a question, which is legitimate. Have you ever blacked out? Don't turn around and say, how about you? Have you ever blacked out, Senator? I mean, I thought that in itself is something that lingers forget about him and her for a second. To me, that's something, Rick, that lingers in my mind, his temperament for the court.
Exactly. No, I said that the very day. I go, even if you don't believe the allegations, even if you're on his side entirely, that display, is that someone you really want on the court? That kind of, because I had a bunch of people, reach out and say, if it was you, Rick, if you were falsely accused, you'd be angry too. And I'd go, yeah, I would be, but there's a point at which you have to understand the room that which you're playing. And the room in which he was playing was much bigger than just that Senate room.
Mm-hmm. Well, for example, Lindsey Graham, who I've never been a huge fan, but I must say, what he said with, it was stern, and it was aggressive, and it was passionate, and it was pointing, but it was a different league of where he sat as a senator talking to other senators, okay? Right. But it's not that you have to be kowtowed to. But if I was on that panel and I was serving back in the House and I was on a House panel and that type of thing happened and I was chairman of the committee, I'm afraid I'd have had to have banged the gavel and said, the senators aren't the ones that are asked questions today about anything personal with them because they're not serving on the court. I think I would have had to have done that. And I know I would have because I've done it before. I don't care, Democrat or Republican, if you get a witness that badgers a member for no reason, you correct them.
Yeah, and why didn't the senators? Why didn't one of them put him in his place? I mean, if it were me, I would have.
I brought it up.
I would have gone, "Who do you think you're talking to?"
That's why I brought it up. You have to defend your members. I don't care which side of the aisle, in the sense of, again, not that they have to be kowtowed to, but the fact that that's an inappropriate question for him to ask them. It has nothing to do with anything. And somebody can say, well, it has nothing to do with him. Well, yes, it does, because it's been brought up. So it has to be asked. And that part of it is the thing that got me, frankly, the most, versus the holes in his testimony, the holes in her testimony, or what he said or what she said. It was the demeanor that kind of grabbed me.
Yeah. Did you see the female prosecutors, or as the woman from Saturday Night Live said, you can just call me prosecutor. The report that she put out that said this is a he said, she said, and it's even weaker than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
We will see what happens. And finally, I guess Iran has launched some missiles into eastern Syria. What's going on?
Right. There was an attack in Ahwaz, which is south and western in Iran, and there's an Arab minority population down there. They're actually Iranians of Arab descent, though, because the Persians, Iranians are Persian, they're not Arab. And there's always been problems with that Arab minority not liking, the Shah of Iran, or not liking the clerics, either one. And so the Iranians blame them, but they also blame militants in Syria, who they say have incited them and supported them. And of course, they also say Saudi Arabia and the United States and Israel have also supported those militants. Not sure about Israel and the United States. I would say Saudi Arabia definitely has, because Iran and Saudi Arabia are having wars all over the planet, proxy wars.
Right.
So this was Iran's Revolutionary Guard. They're very conservative, saying, hey, we went after the bad people that, unfortunately killed a lot of innocent people down in Ahwaz.
So it was a good excuse.
Yeah. Good. Yes, it was now, did they actually get militants? Who knows? I mean, it's the Mideast. I mean, you don't know.
All right. Well, so any idea where this leads, or is this a one-off, or is this something that we'll see constantly? Because look, I don't think most people know the region or the geopolitics behind it.
Well, I mean, I lived in Iran and I lived in Saudi Arabia, both, and nobody is going to go attack Iran over them lobbing these missiles into eastern Syria. Nobody. Okay, and Assad surely isn't, because Assad, the head of Syria, likes the Iranians and he doesn't like the militants in that region. I think our big powder keg comes from within, with John Bolton as the national security advisor, and Pompeo, the Secretary of State. They're hawks on this issue, and Saudi Arabia trying to manipulate every single thing we do, and they get away with it because they have all the oil. I think that's our powder keg potentially. We can't react to what the Iranians do in eastern Syria by trying to do something against them.
Yeah.
It's as bad as as they function as a government, the Iranians, we just got to be very careful.
And still, we've got John Bolton, who I know you're a big fan of.
Yeah, I mean, that's the scary man, and he wants a war, makes no bones about it. And he's sitting in earshot of the president.
Oh, thanks for that. Yep. Thanks for that, Bob.
Yep. Scares me.
Always great talking with you.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. That is scary. I mean, John Bolton's scary, just the mustache itself. Just scary, crazy. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
In June, our immigrant-bashing president ordered an end to his own warped policy of forcibly tearing terrified migrant children from the arms of their asylum-seeking parents. Trump declared, "I didn't like the sight or the feeling of families being separated." Yeah, bad optic, as PR consultants call scenes of such thuggishness. So he and we no longer have to witness nightly TV coverage of shrieking toddlers being taken from their parents and hauled off to federal warehouses. But wait, out of sight doesn't mean the depravity has ended. Some 500 of the 2,900 children who were snatched last spring are still in government custody, scared that they'll never see their parents again and traumatized by the uncertainty of what'll happen to them. Worse, more refugee children are being incarcerated every day as they seek asylum from the horrors of rapacious gang wars and abject poverty in their Central American homelands. More than 12,000 migrant children are now out of sight and out of mind in our government's warehouses, military bases, and sprawling tent cities. And Trump is requesting money to lock up another 20,000 children. All this trauma and cost is the result of the Trumpeteers' inhumane and failed zero-tolerance policy of jailing children, even babies, in hopes of scaring other refugees from seeking asylum in our land of opportunity. They created this humanitarian crisis, and rather than ending it by rushing in hundreds of lawyers and judges to process the asylum requests, Trump and his rabidly anti-immigrant ideologues are taxing us by building more jails for refugees, while also openly violating the law that says immigrant children cannot be locked up for more than 20 days. This is Jim Hightower saying, for more about Trump's sick and sickening policy, contact Kids in Need of Defense at supportkind.org.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Sanity for a change. The Rick Smith Show.
I think Brett Pransky had an interesting observation. People just want the pain to stop. And, I said this before, I look at, Wisconsin in 2011 and 12. And it's one of the observations I made there. The Republican playbook was just to inundate people with message, with pain, with craziness, to where people just want, I want to go to my kid's soccer game and not have to think about the weight of the world coming down on me. I want to be able to watch, some mindless TV program without there being an interruption for this or that. Or, I don't know if you saw Saturday Night Live, but they had Kanye West on, and I commented on it. Evidently, he said something about repealing the 13th Amendment, and then changed it to where he wanted to amend it. I'm not quite sure all of that, and it went on some long tirade about how Democrats were the party of slavery, and they have a welfare plan, and but you didn't know that. And it was just an interesting kind of weird little world. And I look at our quote of the day from George Takei, who said Trump and Kanye have a lot in common, actually. Both believe they're far more gifted than they actually are. Both are known to deliver rambling, nonsensical speeches, and both profess to love someone named Kim. I think that's about right. Anyway, here to help us work through some of the insanity and maybe tell us what the hell Thursday was, I've asked our good friend Propane Jane to come talk with us. Jane, thanks for taking time for us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me back.
So let's start off with Kanye first. Did you see the rambling speech?
I didn't see it. He's preposterous. I've completely tuned him out
Okay,
for
next.
months now.
But, you know, he brought up something that is a constant, it's a constant frame of every right-winger. In that, you know, the Democrats were the party of slavery, which, you know, 150 years ago, they were. But time evolves, things change. And then they throw out the Democrats, they had a plan to enslave black people legally with welfare, which, you know, I'm not buying. Sorry.
I mean, it's like they kidnapped him and like took him to the lab that they have in Stepford Wives. I don't know if you've seen that movie. But they just removed like whatever was there before and then just implanted all of these tropes and all of these cliche dog whistle narratives that they've been saying for the last 50 years. I still continue to think it's really disappointing that this is the man that he's chosen to become.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was a fan of his music and, you know, at least the message that I thought he was in some ways putting into his music way back when. But everything he's doing today stands in very stark contradiction of that. And I think people who understand his music and have appreciated his music over the years are really just appalled and taken aback by it.
Yeah, I mean, the bullying thing, evidently he was bullied at Saturday Night Live, and I'm going, really? You know, I thought, you know, rappers were supposed to be the ones bullying people, not being bullied.
Well, but this is, you know, the other thing that they have in common, you know, there was all those things that George Takei mentioned about them, which I think was very apt as well. But these are also people who have very narcissistic, egotistical traits to their personalities, and they are people that we always sort of mention their names in association with those words, like narcissism and ego and selfishness and ignorance. And bravado, all of those things they do have in common, and I think that's why they're drawn to each other in the same reason that Trump is drawn to Kim Jong-un.
Who they're in love. Evidently, they share love letters, and they fell in love. And hey, who's against a good love story?
I mean, he wants to be a part of the dictator club. He wants to be endeared to these people. And this feels good to him, and he feels no shame in coming out and saying that he fell in love with a murderous dictator.
I don't even know where to go with that.
Yeah, it's,
I mean,
bizarre.
It's, you know, I saw that and I'm going, and the people in the audience didn't even respond to it until he threw out the liberal media, they'll turn this, and they're like, yeah, and I'm going, did you just not hear what he said?
I mean, but that's how quickly they flip. They're just waiting for him to say something that feels like a rah-rah moment, and they have that level of cognitive dissonance that they're able to do that. But thus far, he's continued to just be the antithesis of what we would expect a president to be to this point, and it continues to be an embarrassment.
It's crazy, and
yeah.
Let me ask you this. I mean, because you know we've been talking about all these people who are narcissistic. Is it an epidemic today? I mean, are we at epidemic levels yet? Can the CDC do something?
I mean, I don't necessarily know that we are at epidemic levels, but I think that at least for the last 20 years, we've lived in a culture of social media and reality television and everybody making themselves a celebrity in whatever way they're able to do it on whatever social media platform they have or whatever platform they have in, you know, the popular culture or politics. And so because people are able to do that, you have people who are going to those excesses, and then you see it publicly because we're consuming so much of this material. And I think that people like Trump and people like Kanye, they really thrive in these moments because they can continue to make a crisis out of a crisis out of a crisis because they never let things go. They're always personally slighted. Even when they come into a situation behaving very arrogantly and ignorantly, they take offense to people calling them out on that. And then they play the victim and say, oh, I was being bullied, or, you know, the fake press doesn't like me, or whatever, you know, things that they trot out. and then they have to make it this back and forth rather than just dealing with what the issues are head on.
So the comment over the 13th Amendment, he said originally he wanted to repeal it, and then it was amended. Is that a big deal or not a big deal, or is that just something that, hey, it's just him being him?
This is an ignorant man. I don't. I mean, again, I think he's musically talented. I'm not trying to take anything away from his musical aptitude because it's very amazing in a lot of ways. But when it comes to American politics, when it comes to the Constitution, when it comes to the law, he's stepping into an arena that he has no information about.
Yeah.
I mean, his most popular album, when he came out, it was called College Dropout. And that's what he was talking about, that he, didn't take that path that his mother, who was a professor, wanted for him, to go to higher education and to maybe learn some of these things in a real way so that he wouldn't come out and say really ignorant things like that. But this is what we have, where people are elevated, and because they're a celebrity and they're popular, we automatically, for some reason, ascribe some level of intelligence to them or wisdom to them that they don't always actually have in reality.
Maybe he was hanging around too much with Lindsay Lohan. Did you see the video of her?
No, I did not.
Evidently, she was following a homeless family in Russia and tried to grab one of the kids because she said they claimed that they were trafficking the kids, and the woman punched her in the face, which was kind of hysterical. But just, what are you doing in Russia chasing around homeless people, you lunatic? I mean, what is it with famous people and this self-entitled kind of, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, but there's a privilege that these people have to do things, and, when they do something like that, it doesn't become this life-altering thing that then they can't get a job and nobody's talking to them and their life falls apart like it would for an average, ordinary person. But when you have a certain privilege, like we've seen with Brett Kavanaugh, when you have this sort of sense of entitlement, there are a lot of things that you may do that you don't necessarily face the same consequences that an ordinary person would.
Yeah.
And so you continue to just keep doing them.
All right, let's get to it. You brought up Kavanaugh. What the hell was that? I mean, I don't know what that was. I don't know who advised him that was a good idea, but I don't know if you saw the Saturday Night Live clip.
Yes.
They mocked. I don't even know that was mocking. I don't know it was a caricature of him. I think it was an accurate portrayal. I thought they were spot on.
I agree. That's what he came across like, and I think that they portrayed it quite well. And it was a temper tantrum. It was a high to low. It was a roller coaster ride through his narcissistic injury and rage, basically.
A friend had said that he looked like a dry drunk.
Oh, I can't tell you how many people have tweeted that to me since that happened. I mean, the whole time it was going on. And people were going, oh, my gosh, if this is what he's like when he's sober, imagine what he's like, when he's actually drinking, which is true. And, the psychiatrist in me is saying, how do we even know for sure if he is sober?
That's the question. I mean, because here's the thing. Someone had said to me that, well, he's gone through 6 FBI investigations. I'm going, wait a second. You don't get to be the right hand of the president of the United States during the Bush years, which he was. You don't get to rise to that level without being able to quash a couple of minor little things along the way. And no one's going to come out against you and accuse you of anything because, well, retribution is coming your way if you do.
Right.
You don't rise to this level without being able to put out a fire here or there.
No, I mean, that's very true. But also, I mean, just the basic fact with alcohol, not to get too wonky about it, but, most of the urine drug screens that we do for employment background checks are only testing for like cocaine, marijuana, opiates, barbiturates, amphetamines, PCP. They don't routinely include alcohol in those tests. So somebody who's drinking, if they don't actually breathalyze that person or they don't get a blood alcohol level on that person, however much alcohol they consume doesn't really factor into the urine drug screen that they're getting, if that's all that they're getting. And so it's really possible for people to actually, be what they call functioning alcoholics, like Denzel Washington in Flight, because they fly above the radar of that standard screening mechanism.
No, some of the alcoholics I've known over the years were some of the best workers I ever met. They needed beer money.
Yeah.
And it's not a joke. I mean, some of the, they showed up on time until they hit rock bottom, of course.
Right.
And then they were really bad. But, while they were still functioning, boy, they were top people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that, what concerns me, again, as a clinician, when somebody sits there and not only has this very public mood swing without any level of insight or self-control to rein it in, knowing that, like, hey, I'm trying to get on the Supreme Court here. My temperament matters. That he wasn't able to tamp down those impulses, number one. But then also that he had no problem with being very proud of his alcohol use and, repeatedly said how much he loved beer. And
I've been playing the I like beer song all for the last couple of days. So, I mean, the one person who's going to win out of all this will be Tom T. Hall. And as someone, told me, he's still alive, according to Wikipedia. So maybe he can tour again.
I mean, I can't imagine. And again, maybe it's just because I'm a black woman. But I cannot even imagine going into a job interview, because this is what this is. Going into a job interview as a black woman, I don't care how many degrees I have, and saying, oh, I love beer, repeatedly.
And yelling at the interviewer.
And then having the expectation, right? Yeah, after I've yelled at them, after I've gotten all huffy, and have the expectation that this job is owed to me. You're going to give this to me. I can't even imagine. I mean, that is the world we live in, that this man is still even under consideration after having done all of that, let alone the fact that we really aren't asking very serious questions about how much does he drink in the present day and how much does his use of alcohol potentially affect his insight and his judgment as he's making decisions on the court.
Yeah, nobody asked that question. But here's the thing, I look at this and I know a lot of people say, that's white male privilege right there. I'm a white guy. I'd never get away with that. That's elite privilege. That's a level of privilege well beyond me. And he even went into this, this whole Horatio Alger thing where, I busted my butt and I did it all by myself, only to find out that Grandpa was a legacy. He got in because he was a white guy who had privilege.
Yeah, and I'm just going to quote Ann Richards here that, this is a guy who was born on third, but thinks he hit a triple.
Yep.
And so, he, in this world, they don't consider that to be a leg up. They don't consider the fact that their dad or their grandfather or whoever it is in their circle called whoever and, blew through the paperwork and did whatever needed to do, shook hands, exchanged money, whatever had to happen for that kid to get in, no matter what his behavioral problems were, no matter what his, intellectual aptitude was. And these people go through life. We had George W. Bush. We saw similar things in terms of, and that's why it's no surprise that they're so chummy in terms of the way that he elevated up the, political world and the business world because of the connections in his family. But they don't necessarily see it that way.
Because it's always been that way for them. They've always had that leg up. They've always had that, as the one guy explained to me a number of years ago, invisible capital. You and I, we know nothing about that because we don't have it. But, someone like Trump, someone like Kavanaugh, someone in these positions, they've, they drop, daddy's name and they get into a room that we don't even get to know which building the room's in.
Absolutely. And beyond that, more importantly, they evade the most detrimental consequences of having to interact with the criminal justice system. And we know that for men of color, for instance, when they have these incidents, when they have these behavioral problems, they get thrown, into the school to prison pipeline. And so they don't have this somebody calling somebody and they know the judge and they know the sheriff. And so they're not going to have to face any consequences. And so they actually go to jail and they have a criminal record and then they can't get out and actually work most jobs because of that, and that affects them for the rest of their lives. And so instead of being, up for the Supreme Court, who knows where they are at that point.
Yeah, and the other part of this is not only was Grandpa, a legacy, Mom was a judge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's not just some kid walking on the street corner. This is somebody who was well connected, and I found his whole testimony to be one of playing dodgeball or being completely dishonest or lying. I mean, at some point, don't we have to start looking at this in the light of a legal frame where he committed perjury, especially when he was asked about when he learned about the allegations, of the woman, I think Ramirez is her name.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, when the story came out, when we now find out, and again, this is why I don't think he wanted the FBI investigating. We now find out, he or his team was texting classmates before the story even came out to line up the defense. And then, again, this plays into, my initial thought of, 65 women from high school signed a letter the next day, and this wasn't pre-done. Bull.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing I just thought, right as you were saying that. I mean, exactly. This is something that was in his past. It was a known thing. These are allegations that have followed him through his lifespan. And this is something that the Republicans knew. And Chuck Grassley providing that letter, again, continues to look very suspicious.
Yeah.
In light of all these things. And I think even beyond that, what's most disgusting about it is that they still haven't decided that this isn't their guy.
No, that's the scary part about it. I mean, the Republicans are, the allegations, and this is going to sound horrible, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. Slap me down if I need it. The allegations of Kavanaugh holding her down and putting his hand over her mouth and all of that are bad enough. But what the Republicans are doing, I think, is actually worse than that, because these are the people who are supposed to be level-headed and know better. These are supposed to be the arbiters of our laws. These are the people who write the damn laws. And to have them sitting in judgment of this woman who they claimed is very credible.
Right.
And do you buy that? Do you buy the whole we find they're credible, good people on both sides nonsense? Do you buy that?
No, I don't buy it. And you know who? Orrin Hatch said, I don't believe her, but she's attractive.
I'd hold her down.
I mean, it's just the lack of insight, the lack of judgment. They are just in such a world of patriarchy and misogyny that they're not even able to hear how they sound to other people.
And you wonder why they brought in the female prosecutor.
Exactly. And she didn't make it look any better, honestly.
No, I think she did exactly what she was supposed to do. Can you remember any question that she asked?
No.
Of course not. There was supposed to be nothing memorable about Miss Ford's testimony. Nothing.
I mean, I think that from the standpoint of the women who identified with her in that moment, I think the rage that you feel and that pain that, like you were saying in the opening, about people just wanting the pain to stop, I think her delivering that testimony and exposing us to the pain and the terror that she felt, again, like I said a couple of weeks ago, it's very traumatizing and triggering for especially women, but I would say there are even some men who are triggered by it. And so I think that this is a moment where people are so outraged about it, and for the Republicans to be so tone deaf to the extent that it's abusive, actually, and to continue to be trying to ram this through, even in light of all the allegations that are coming out. And I think that's why they want to ram it through, because they know that the more time it has to sit, the more information is going to come out. They know they have a lemon of a candidate. I think it's very clear to them that that truly is the case. But they are really just testing the limits of what they can get away with at this point.
It reminds me of something George Carlin said. He did a bit on Vietnam, years and years ago, and it was like, pull out doesn't sound manly to me. I say we stay in there and get the job done. It's the same kind of mentality.
Yeah, and I think it's going to get to kind of an avalanche point where the more and more information that continues to drip, 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 and the more time that runs out on the clock, this really puts them in a very bad situation going into the midterm. This is something I think they probably logistically really wanted to have hammered out and then just have the whole month of October to gloat and, you know, really have this feel like they really dominated everybody and owned the libs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
but
we held them down and put our hands over their mouth.
Exactly, right? I mean, they get off on that level of oppression. And so I think the fact that it's not going the way that they planned, at some point, you know, that really has a risk of going sour for them.
Do you see them at the end of the week confirming him anyway? I mean, because look, the last thing I saw, evidently there are now 6 people that the FBI are talking to, that their stories that I understand are somewhat credible, that, you know, that they've unearthed the police report of a fight while drinking. They, you know, all of this every day. I'm assuming for the rest of this week, they're going to be drips and drabs of who knows what, and then who knows what the FBI is really finding, what Mark Judge is saying, because evidently he's cooperating. You know, do you think they just ram it through regardless of what they find, or do you think there's actually a possibility where it's derailed?
I think there's a possibility it could be derailed. And the reason why I say that is because in behavioral science there are patterns. When people behave a certain way, they are likely to repeat that behavior over and over and over again, right? And so when you're in criminology, when you're in psychiatry, you look for those patterns. And I think somebody like him, when you really start digging and you really start hearing from people, they're just connecting the dots like a web. And the more and more possibility there is for more incidents that we haven't heard about, and not necessarily in regards to everything being a sexual assault allegation, but also these reports of physical aggression and violence, and how that's going to play into the whole picture as well, as it relates to his alcohol use as well. So I think that there's a potential for it to blow up and really balloon, even though they're trying to put these really close parameters, like it's only going to be a week. And I don't think the FBI doesn't work that way. They're not going to do their job with such constraints.
Yeah, well, everyone says they only took 3 days to do the Anita Hill thing, so this is double that.
This is double that, but again, when you go back to social media and you go back to the idea that when people feel like they're not being heard, they will go to extenuating circumstances and they will take sort of extreme, more drastic measures. And so like you see Michael Avenatti, you know, he's talking about how he hasn't been contacted, et cetera, et cetera. And it raises this prospect of more information just sort of being leaked through social media channels and creating a media firestorm just based off of that information being out there. And then it needs to be given some type of, you know, official investigation to have some credibility. So I think, you know, it's kind of like the Mueller investigation. If you really want to have conclusive answers, you're going to have to just really let them take their time and follow the investigation where it leads.
Yeah, no, we don't have time for that. We've got a confirmation to get on with. We've got a coronation to get on with. And that's really what this seems to me to be. I mean, you know, as I've been saying, I mean, the Republicans could pull this nomination, and quite easily by the time January rolls around, they could have another, you know, crazy person that they've rammed through. Why does it have to be this guy? Why? I know he's Trump's get out of jail free card, so to speak, but you could have the crazy woman from Indiana who I'm sure didn't hold a man down and put her hand over his mouth, or maybe she did and he liked it. I don't know, but you know, it's one of these weird things. They could get a crazy conservative on the court. Why does it have to be this guy?
But can you imagine the blow to the ego for these men that we've talked about as being very privileged and entitled and feeling like they're always right and everybody else is wrong? And to what an admission of a mistake that would be to pull this candidate or to have this candidate be defeated because they didn't do a thorough background check, or they just, you know, are too much of sociopaths themselves to really care what was in his background.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't bode well for them electorally either way. which also makes me wonder, like, do they just feel like they have the election rigged again and in the bag? So some of these things, they're not worried about suffering consequences at the voting booth in November.
Now, I saw a story in your neck of the woods. Evidently, voter registration in your state is way up, I guess, historic levels.
It absolutely is, and you know why.
I'm hoping you throw Ted Cruz out. I'm hoping that everybody in the state punches him in the face.
I can't wait to get rid of him. I mean, you can feel the energy in the air. There's so many Beto signs. People love him. I think people are fired up. I think people are engaged. I think people are ready to vote. I feel good about it.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, I think he's a good candidate. I think he'll be a good senator. I think he'll be. I think he'll be a good senator. So, last question I've got for you. Out of this, regardless of the confirmation, because I think it's a done deal. I don't care what they find. I think the Republicans have already got it in their mind. They're going to, at the end of the week, they're going to have their confirmation, and he's going to be on the court. What, as a society, what can we take from this? I mean, there have been a lot of stories of women coming out and telling their stories, and it's been kind of almost a mass therapeutic thing, maybe. Any thoughts, hopes, anything in that vein that maybe this will have positives down the road outside of the court confirmation?
Yeah, I think the pendulum is always going to swing back and forth, and I think the more draconian the Republicans continue to be, that's only going to continue to galvanize people on the other side and really wake us up and get us activated and mobilized to get them out of office. And I think we are, in these moments reaffirming what our values are as a society. I saw a clip of Janet Jackson, and I can't remember what the event was. It was just recently at a concert, and she kind of spoke at length about just being really disgusted with what's going on and the misogyny and the bigotry and the injustice. And I think that this is a moment where we need to look at all of these things and actually declare our disdain for it and what we actually want to see in the world, and to actually prove that by putting it into action. And I think that, the best way to do that for all of us is just to get out there and vote. That's the start. That's how we turn the ship around.
Well, I mean, as I say all the time, I mean, the amazing thing about this country is this experiment in self-governance and self-rule. Maybe we should use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they're going to take it away.
If they haven't already. So we will see come November. Jane, always great talking with you. I appreciate the time, the insight. Good stuff.
You too. Thank you. Have a great week.
You as well. As always, our good friend Propane Jane. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day Illinois Governor Frank Loudon hoped to meet with striking streetcarmen in an effort to end their strike. Transit workers in Springfield, the state's capital, had been off the job since July 25th. But the strike had gained so much support that Springfield had now erupted into a full-blown general strike. According to the Sangamon County Historical Society, thousands of union members shut down mines, railroads, bakeries, restaurants, laundries, and construction sites following the violent crackdown of a pro-labor march by state police and militia. The march had been scheduled for September 9th. The union hoped to show support for the striking streetcarmen after a number of clashes between strikers and state militia. After they were denied a permit, many of the 50 or so unions decided to march anyway and were attacked. Some were shot. More than 40 suffered bayonet-inflicted injuries. By the 11th, most everyone in Springfield had walked off the job. Striking women shoe factory workers stopped a streetcar, pulling the scab drivers off by force. By the end of the week, as many as 12,000 members of 34 unions in the city were on strike. When telephone operators walked off the job, they paralyzed communications of the scab streetcar drivers and the state National Guardsmen. The streetcar strikers refused to meet with the governor until troops were withdrawn from the city. The governor insisted disloyal, pro-German forces were at fault for the labor troubles. By the 16th, the streetcarmen agreed to negotiate and the general strike was called off. But the company refused to meet striker demands for recognition and higher wages, or even take them back. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Lessons of the past we all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on! The unit forever defending rights. Let's fight right, we are workers unite. With our brothers and our sisters from many far off lands. There is power in our
So the quote for today from Donald Trump, and look, you got to give Trump credit. You know, he's dismissive to women at every opportunity. You don't think, and you never do. But in that next sentence, because that's what got all the attention, the next sentence, what we saw was, according to Donald Trump, Republicans love the new NAFTA, industry loves it, and the country loves it. And the question is we don't even know what's in it. How can we love something we don't even know what it is? And here to share some thoughts on maybe what we do know, I've asked our good friend Celeste Drake to come talk with us, trade and globalization policy specialist with the AFL-CIO. Celeste, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So Republicans love it, industry loves it, America loves it.
Feels like a little bit of an overstatement. I think you're exactly right. Not very few people know what's in it. Even the folks that are on the, top secret advisory committees that oversee trade policy negotiations. And There's that, one labor committee within that. So we've got about 5% of the advisors, whereas 90% of them are representing the very global corporations that are outsourcing and taking our jobs away and pushing our wages down. We didn't even know what was in it. The labor union presidents who were on that committee were tasked with a legal obligation to write a report on the renegotiated NAFTA, and that report had to be turned in by September 27th. And, as we were writing it, we didn't know, was Canada going to be in? We hadn't seen the final text on the auto rule of origin, which is touted as being the big deal that's going to get new auto jobs in the U.S. and Canada. Schedules, which is where it says how much of our government purchasing is going to be given away to Mexico and Canada, that was completely missing. So we were writing a report where we just didn't have all the facts.
That didn't matter, though, Celeste. They're not going to read it anyway.
Well, I think that's the question, right? The facts do matter. And as we know, we're the working people who have lived through the devastation that's been caused by the World Trade Organization, the North American Free Trade Agreement, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, the KORUS, the Korea Free Trade Agreement, all of these. And so we know that the rules do matter. The devil is in the details. It's not trade that's bad and that hurts working families. It's bad rules of trade that are written by and for corporations. So we do need new rules. So sure, absolutely give credit for renegotiating, but it's we, the working people of the United States and our allies in our trading partner countries that have been demanding this renegotiation for 25 years. And now it's too important to just give a slogan. It's been fixed. It's done. We love it. It's so important that we really do need to know each and every single detail to find out if it's really better than the current terrible, awful, job-killing NAFTA.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing, again, the one thing I did agree with Trump on during the campaign. And look, I said from the beginning, he stole labor's message on the trade issue. He stole Bernie Sanders' message as well. And this is, to me, you're right. It has to be done. I remember Barack Obama saying the same thing. We're going to renegotiate NAFTA. He tried, through the TPP. Obviously, I think it was trying to make it worse. But the question becomes, with you think Trump knows what's in this deal? I mean, I'm kind of leery that he knows anything about it.
Well, I'm not sure. I wouldn't begin to guess. He doesn't seem a particularly detail-oriented guy. But look, all of these things, these are really technical things. There are rules about how we have to treat patents and copyrights and how we can inspect food and how we should make our regulations in all parts of the economy. So there really are very few people in the country that know all the details, and even the negotiators. When I call over to USTR, if I want to say I want to talk to somebody about investment, and I want to talk to you about the labor chapter, and I want to talk to you about medicines, I'm talking to 3 different people. So even the folks working on it don't know the whole picture. And that's why it's really important, because when you say, is it going to be better, I think at this point, from what we know, there are parts that are better than the current NAFTA. There are parts that are worse than the current NAFTA. And there's so much that we don't know that the presidents are saying, we just can't, it's too soon. It's premature to make a final call. And instead, let's keep working on it. Let's keep trying to improve it so that we don't give up on really getting a deal that helps workers until we know this is, just like if we were negotiating a contract, the last, best, and final offer.
But one of the things I found very ironic, it came out today that, the U.S. is pushing Mexico to allow workers to join and form unions and reform some of their laws. And I found it very interesting and kind of ironic that we're, telling other countries to do something that we're not doing.
It's true. It's true. I think that, the situation in Mexico is worse by far. By no means is the United States a beacon of light in terms of labor rights around the world. But Mexico is in an entirely different category where its governments, really since NAFTA, have taken an aggressively anti-worker stance.
And ours hasn't yet?
Well, even more so, for instance.
No, I get that. I mean, but we're heading there.
It's true. And the ironic part is that this particular president, who has not been helpful, has attempted to take away the freedom of association and collective bargaining rights, think about it through what he has done with the NLRB, denying rights to federal employees, also rolling back workplace safety rules with respect to beryllium and silica dust, also rolling back overtime rules. I mean, it's just across the board in terms of how this administration has been rolling back labor rights for U.S. workers.
Right. And don't forget the 2 big ones. I mean, the 2 Supreme Court nominees he put up, both, Gorsuch, the decision he was willing to let a truck driver die on the side of the road as opposed to being fired. And now this guy who, that woman who got chewed up by the killer whale, that wasn't SeaWorld's fault, even though they've done it a number of times before. That's not a big deal. She knew the risks.
Yeah, it's absurd. I mean, so that's why I think even if once all the facts are known and the details are known and the implementing legislation is, once everything's clear about the new NAFTA, even if that is something that is worthy of worker support, which is really an open question right now, that doesn't undo everything else this president has done. And it doesn't make him overnight a pro-worker president.
Right.
But it is important to look at it. NAFTA is so damaging, and it's so harmful to wages across North America, and it really has done the opposite of help Mexican workers. I mean, in the end, Mexico's approach like I was saying, has been a purposeful policy of wage suppression, a purposeful policy of promoting and endorsing these employer-dominated unions and making sure that the courts, to the extent that we think that the NLRB, whenever there's a Republican majority, isn't fair to workers, the labor courts in Mexico, they're called the CABs, have been so much worse and so much more one-sided. And if that really changes, that could be transformational for Mexico's workers. And if it's transformational for them, it's certainly not something that will happen overnight.
Right.
But that changes the balance in North America, and it really says to those workers, you can actually start, really sharing in the gains from trade. You can start benefiting from all this investment that's in your country. It will lift their wages and working conditions in the long run. And as we start to, bring up the bottom in terms of the lowest wages in North America, that means that there's less pressure on U.S. and Canadian workers to accept concessionary contracts. There's less pressure. That threat that, you better take our cuts or we might go to Mexico, becomes a little less salient. And so that's really what we want, is we want trade that isn't a race to the bottom, but a race to the top. And so that's why it's really worth kind of sticking in this game and trying to fight for a deal that works. And it cannot absolutely be about trust, not just because folks wouldn't trust, this president who's taken away rights elsewhere, but there's no president, Democratic or Republican, who's ever effectively enforced a trade agreement. So these have to be real provisions that take away that discretion to ignore labor problems. Because if that discretion, if that ability for our government to just ignore labor rights abuses remains, we haven't changed the fundamental flaw of NAFTA.
No, you're right. Let me ask you this, though. I mean, any chance this passes? I mean, any chance this gets through Congress? Because, I'm looking at it. If I'm a Republican in a fairly, bluish state, in a manufacturing state, Ohio, Pennsylvania, I'm looking at this going, do I really want the Republican brand to be tied to the new NAFTA? Because look, as I've said a number of times, NAFTA was birthed under Ronald Reagan. It was fully negotiated under George H.W. Bush. In fact, he signed the first, couple iterations of it. But at the end of it, it was Bill Clinton who put his name on the final bill, and it was the Democrats' NAFTA. It's been tied around the Democrats' necks ever since. This new iteration of NAFTA 2.0, whatever you want to call it, this is going to be the Republicans' baby.
I think it will be, and I think it's impossible to say right now how it goes. I think there are a lot of Republicans, especially those who really are the champions of the global corporations rather than the champions of their own constituents, who just want to vote yes on anything because their biggest fear is that the president withdraws from the current NAFTA with no replacement. So I think there's a big percentage of the Republican Party that says, I'll just vote yes on anything, and guess what? All my allies in the business community will pay for a bunch of ads, and they'll get me reelected.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of folks that have been working on fair trade issues, either since the time of NAFTA or since they've been elected to Congress, if they're a newer member, and they're mostly Democrats, but a few Republicans, and they feel like their voters, particularly if they're from Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, they really are looking for more than just a promise. These are folks who have heard the promises to death. NAFTA is going to create jobs. China joining the WTO is going to create jobs, and they've seen it all before. And I think those voters are really going to hold folks' feet to the fire. So I think it's a real question. Are they willing to go out on a limb and support it and try and take credit if it really works? Are they maybe just going to vote no because nobody trusts that you can do trade right? I mean, that's sort of the problem, is trade absolutely has a bad name in many places of the country when, again, it's not the trade and it's not the Mexican workers, and it's not, all these problems are really because the global corporations were essentially given the pen to write rules that benefited them at the expense of workers,
right?
Not with workers. And is that really changed? I mean, I think you're going to have, at the end of the day, however this, like I said, there's a lot of unanswered questions. But even when those questions get answered, this is going to be a balancing act agreement. There will be things that are bad, and does the good in it outweigh the things that are bad? That's going to be a real question. This is still negotiated by a Republican administration that has lots of friends in the business community. So it is not the deal that the AFL-CIO would have written, or if you would have given your pen to your local, Fair Trade Campaign Association, or your local small farmer group or your local environmental group. That's not this deal. But it still might be worth supporting. It's just really clear that nobody knows that answer yet. So it's too early to declare victory, and it's too early to walk away and say, well, that's over, that was a bust. Neither of those are true.
Right, but politically, Trump's this is going to be a win for him because he did come through on a campaign pledge. Now, like you said, we don't know what it's going to be or how it's going to play out, but politically, it's a win.
It's a win in that, he said he'd renegotiate it. He did renegotiate it. Whether that's really going to translate into votes, I think the folks in the most trade-affected states are going to look for more than a slogan. I think they really, because, we're hearing from trade union members like, well, is this even worth talking about? Wouldn't we just oppose it like we've opposed every other trade agreement? So I think the workers themselves have set the bar really, really high, and I think it's going to take more than sloganeering, and that's why it's important for us to sort of get some of this information out about the good, the bad, and the unknown.
Yeah, I mean, instead of the lipstick on the pig or a little window dressing, which is what I think this is, because some of the ugly stuff is still there. I mean, the investors' state dispute settlement system, that's still there, right?
It's still there, but it is. I have to say, it's meaningfully rolled back. And this is one of the issues that I'm know the most about, and I'm really incensed that the system even exists. But if the text stays as it is, there will be no more ISDS with Canada at all in any form after a 3-year phase out. So that's just gone. So that's a win. That's objectively good for Canadian and American citizens in terms of the suits against each other.
Yeah, but we don't usually sue each other a lot, do we?
We do, as a matter of fact. Okay. Oh, yes. Canada, in fact, is the most sued country under NAFTA. It has more suits against it than Mexico and the U.S.
That makes sense because they got, they're trying to take the high road still. They still want labor and environmental rights. They still want consumer rights. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, and Canadian companies have sued the U.S. So think about the lawsuit about the Keystone XL pipeline.
I actually agreed with that. Oh no,
yeah,
I mean,
well, we might have agreed with the position of being against the pipeline or for the pipeline, but the point is, should those decisions be made in private tribunals that are only available to foreign investors? I mean, that whole idea of it was crazy.
Yeah.
So. And as to Mexico, it will still exist, which it shouldn't, but for most investors, it will be a severely rolled back ISDS. So the only claims that could be made are claims of actual takings without compensation. So where a government would come in and say, we're taking your property and we're not paying you for it. And those kinds of claims are extremely rare because governments actually want to attract foreign investment.
Right.
So they do want to respect property rights. So you could make, or claims of actual discrimination. So you're treating Mexican companies better than U.S. companies or vice versa.
Okay, so on that front, it's probably a little bit better then.
A little bit better. And then here's the really negative part. There is a slice of investments between the U.S. and Mexico that will retain the old, unreformed, pretty awful ISDS where you can challenge, all kinds of health and safety regulations and environmental protections. And that will exist for oil and gas companies, telecom companies, transportation companies, power generation. It's a few isolated sectors, but, let's be honest. Oil and gas companies, they're going to use it. They've used ISDS in the past. They'll continue to use it. But just in comparison to what we have under the current NAFTA, there's no argument that the ISDS provisions in the new one would be better. But again, you've got to weigh those against what's happening with the labor rules, what's happening with affordable medicines, what's happening with our right to inspect food, right? It's going to be a balancing act.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And for me, it's going to be, the drama is going to be what Congress does. I don't know.
It's hard to know, right? Politics will get involved in it. There will be members of Congress who vote a certain way because they do want to give Trump a win, or they don't want to give Trump a win, or they'll vote a certain way because they're big money donors, the global interests that they're always defending want them to vote that particular way. But I think there will be some votes in play, and I think we'll see how it shakes out, because the vote's likely to be next year, not this year. So it'll be a new Congress with potentially new majorities, or at least definitely new people. And, I think there will be a lot of members and senators taking a look and really thinking about NAFTA deeply for the very first time. And so it's really too early to say how all of that is going to go. But certainly, I believe if there is a, Democratic majority in the House, which it's looking, reasonably likely, that you will be likely to have some long-time fair traders who say, we need to get involved here, and we're going to be involved and make sure this deal is as good as we can get it. And whether that means renegotiating any of the terms, like what happened in sort of the May 10th deal in 2007, whether that means really putting their foot down and demanding that the implementing legislation contain everything it needs to be to help working people in the U.S. I mean, these are things that are still in question and need to be worked out, and exactly why we say, let's not rush to judgment here. Let's see how all of these things shake out.
Good advice. We'll see. And, for now, Trump's, touting it as a big win. And look, the fact that he did anything at all, you got to give him at least a little credit for that. But Celeste, as this continues, I'd love to have you back and share some more thoughts. And maybe next time we get into how the auto industry is going to be affected.
Sure. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Our good friends. Thanks so much, Celeste. Appreciate it. Our good friend, Celeste Drake, policy, trade and globalization policy expert there at the AFL-CIO. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery for these.
So a little bit of, look, as someone said in the chat room, if this actually helps workers, I'll give Trump the credit that it is due. I just don't think it's going to. And look, I like Celeste's optimism that at least it's something, and we're having the conversations. I like the idea that it's going to be open and continuing change, and that could be a good thing. As she pointed out, when 90% of the people in the room are corporate, special interests, I'm leery that it's going to benefit you and me, and I do find it ironic that we're telling Mexico that you have to allow labor and environmental rights. to workers while we're in the process of suppressing it. I guess, again, the height of arrogance, if you will. We'll see. I mean, and as she said, we'll see how this plays out. As far as campaign win, it's something that they're going to try and sloganeer on. But as we've seen, in places like West Virginia, life is not getting better for workers. So we'll see how long this takes to play out. But I'm on the side of we got to fix something, and we'll see what happens. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, you can download the podcast there at the website, or get the app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming.